The BSides DC 2016 videos are brought to you by clearedjobs.net and cybersecjobs.com, tools for your next career move, and Antietam Technologies, focusing on advanced cyber detection, analysis, and mitigation.
Healthcare data, about 363 per record, counterfeit social security cards. There's a lot of different things. So you see the kind of higher dollar value on the things that are difficult to replace. Like for example, like go and change your social security number. Okay, that'd be pretty hard, right? Or your medical records, going and changing your medical records. But getting a new credit card, getting a new driver's license, those things are a little bit easier. And part of the problem is that we rely a lot on passwords. So I read a NIST posting for 863 is moving past passwords. So really getting rid of passwords altogether, because generally most people use the passwords as their dog or something. It's pretty easy to guess, or even you have multi-factor authentication. You know, there's a difference between multi-factor authentication and two-factor authentication, right? Because when you're looking at the different factors, it's something you know, something you are, and something you have. If it's two things you know, then it's multi-factor. When it's two-factor, it's something you know and something you have. I was doing some research in grad school, and they proposed an ultra-secure system. And what was the best way to secure it? We had to architect it. And so why don't we just use three-factor authentication? Something you know, something you have, and something you are. So, you know, a password, something that's biometric, and some sort of token. Why not in ultra-secure environments? And also, when we were talking to the Verizon folks, they were saying that in every instance, in every breach that they had investigated, when if two-factor authentication had been used properly, that would have stopped every breach that they investigated. Not that that's, you know, there's no silver bullet, but if you do that, it makes it much, much harder. There were some instances where folks said, I can't believe this happened, even though I had some type of multi-factor, two-factor authentication, the things that they hadn't implemented correctly. So you have to implement it correctly, otherwise you can have some issues. A lot of browsers store passwords. How many people have passwords in their browsers? No. Hands down, good for you, awesome. Or password managers, and we saw a couple weeks ago that password managers can also get breached. So what's the best thing to do? Passwords is really, really tough. I read an article, someone saying that they are going to have some crazy randomized password, and that they're not going to remember on purpose every time they need to log into something. They use the password reset feature. So, yeah, okay, that might work, but that's kind of annoying and getting text and kind of doing a lot of different things. But they have identity access systems and password systems, so you can try to use a single sign-on. But personally, it does become pretty challenging. So how much does a breach cost? And this is something that gets talked about a lot, and people are going in and doing different types of value assessments. And there are different ways of looking at it. So the Polymorphic is saying that it's on average, $7 million per breach. It went up about $500,000. This is just an average, and $221 per record. But then Verizon says that, you know, it's a little bit of a sliding scale. You get economies of scale. As the breach is bigger, then you can do some different things. So they have some ideas there, going from, you know, on the average upper for 100 records, about $357, going all the way down to, you know, looking at 100 million records, and things just start to get cheaper. Other factors that I would consider is, have you done a tabletop assessment? Do you have an incident response plan in place? How are you going to handle PR? Some things that are kind of a little bit outside of security that can help reduce the cost, because you know exactly what to do, who to call, and who to contact. If you have incident response on retainer, even better. That way you won't have to wait, you can bring them in and get to the root cause. And all this traces back because, you know, advanced threats are really, really hard to find. So this is from a Mandian report on the right side. Every breach that they investigated, valid credentials were used. There were, you know, we have a dwell time. The bad guys are in there for a really, really long time. So it's a huge gap in detection. And most of the time, 67% in this study, it's not you saying, oh my God, we've gotten breached. Some three-letter agencies knocking on the door and saying, your data is on some Eastern European server. I'm just saying Eastern European, it could be Russian, it could be Chinese, it could be anywhere, right? But external entities are notifying you that your data is out there somewhere. And this is coming from, you know, cybercriminals, people that are looking to make a buck off of your data. Nation states, this is something that's a little bit harder. They're trying to embarrass the country or embarrass their organization for political reasons. And then insider threats, which are, you know, just really, really hard to detect. So at Splunk, we run this. It's kind of a workshop where we trace back through a kill chain, and kind of what's happening is an attacker is brute forcing a website, steals a legitimate PDF. He attaches malware to the PDF, spearfishes an employee. The PDF actually has the notion of obfuscation, so it can spawn multiple processes. So it's a PDF, it's a vulnerable application. That PDF is going to spawn a calc.exe, which spawns an svc host.exe. And seeing an svc host.exe in Task Manager, you know, pretty hard to figure out which is the right one unless you really get in there. But the way that we trace it back is because the svc host.exe reaches out to known bad command and control. So we catch it with threat intelligence. And if we didn't know any better, we would say, hey, let's just go ahead and wipe that machine. But if you're going to get really high fidelity information from your systems, you can get down to root cause. So in the example, we use a free tool from Microsoft. It's called Microsoft Sysmon, which is pretty neat because it's able to map the network communication to a process ID. And then it's also able to detect parent, child, and grandchild processes. So who's spawning what? So we catch the perpetrator on known bad threat intelligence. And we trace it back through the Sysmon data, and we kind of do it all in Splunk. We trace it back and we say, hey, we know that svc host.exe spawned the communication that's going out to C2. And then we looked at, and we see that svc host.exe was created from calc.exe. And calc.exe was created from the PDF. From the PDF, we look across that individual, and we are, since we also have his email data, we're able to see, hey, this came into an email. We trace it back to the mail server, and we see that 5 other people also received the email with the same attachment, with the same information inside, but they haven't opened it yet. So we can go to the mail server and delete that email before these other systems get infected. So this is kind of the power of being able to get to root cause. And then we look for that file, and we see that it's also on our server, and we see that some suspicious information on multiple requests coming into a server, and that's how we can trace it back. But just the importance of having the right data and being able to get all the way back to root cause. And this is why, you know, kind of everybody talks about the kill chain, but when you're going through that process, you're going through delivery, exploitation, and installation. Usually it's coming from some sort of human interaction. In this example, it's a PDF. It could be a browser exploit because you're running an old version of Chrome, Firefox, and Explorer, Safari, you name it. All of them have exploits. Or you're running an old version of Java that you can take advantage of.
And then your attacker is going to not just get in there, but also establish some tools, build in some backdoors, and then start to move laterally within the environment, which usually most organizations have a hard exterior shell and soft and warm and gushy on the inside. And then you can hop around from one area to another one, gather information, collect it, and then exfiltrate it. And there are a lot of different ways that you can exfiltrate data. You can, and usually they're going to do it through ports that they know are open. So what's open? 80, 443, sometimes ICMP. So there are ways that you can pad data that you want to exfiltrate inside of DNS data, or you can hide it inside of ICMP data. You can encrypt it and get it out through 443. So there are a lot of different ways that you can get data out. And if you have the right data and you're analyzing it, then you're able to piece together the entire story. Going from threat intelligence type of information where there are paid, there's free, and it gets a little bit noisy. So you have to figure out how you're going to rank the different threat intelligence feeds and give them different types of priority so you're not getting inundated with the information that's heading your way. Firewall information. So what's normal transmission for this user? Has this user ever transmitted this amount of data before? Has this device ever transmitted a certain amount of data before? And can we correlate that with other information that we're seeing? If we can get endpoint data, great. What processes are being spawned? Are there any rare or unique processes that we're seeing? Are those automatically being compared against things like VirusTotal, which we know that is going to be of very, very high fidelity? Does that system have a vulnerability for that exploit on it? It's kind of bringing all these things together. And then also combining some sort of contextual information. Because all the computer systems, they don't know that this one server has PII data and the other server has the pictures for the company picnic on it. Not too big of a deal over here, huge deal over here. And just connecting the dots, being able to zoom and pivot through all this information really, really quickly so that you can perform an investigation. And this isn't, hey, let me write some search, click a button, go get coffee and come back. It has to come back within, let's say, about 5 seconds is the reasonable amount, so that you can perform a deep, deep investigation, going from known bad C2, malware, or kind of what are all the different dots, and making sure that you can actually go through and collect them. And that doesn't address the issue with insider threats, because now they don't have to exploit anything. There's no cyber security controls that are in there that we're violating any type of we're not using malware, we're not using exploits. So we have an insider, has access to all the data, and is getting the data out. So when can we actually detect that? How can we detect that? So really there's a new approach that needs to be used. So combining the people, process, and technology, using behavior-based components. So what's normal for every single user? As humans, we're creatures of habit. Most of the time, we're going to do the same thing over and over, log in, connect to VPN, go on Confluence, update something. But when does the behavior actually start to change? And when it changes, we want to be able to call that out and then be able to look at it and analyze it. Be able to share and collaborate. So right now, when you look at, if you look at kind of the dark web and see what's happening in dark IRC channels, they're sharing their information really, really well. They'll say, you know what, this exploit's available on this server for this company. Everybody rushes in there. It's like a smash and grab. But on our side, when somebody gets hacked, they keep all that information and they don't really want to share exactly what they did, what happened. So on their end, they're able to operationalize their attacks, and we're helping them by not sharing the attack patterns. We're starting to do some things with, the different ISACs that are out there, but that's just IP addresses going outbound, and kind of get into it a little bit. But if we can get to the point where we're sharing their TTPs, their tactics, techniques, and processes, and export them and be able to share that really quickly, then they'll have to rewrite their malware. That'll make it a lot more expensive for them, and then they'll go do something else that's easier. So sharing and collaborating is critical. We talked about analyzing all of the data and then leveraging IOC and threat intel information. So we've highlighted the threats. They're definitely out there. The lack of people is huge. So we need to be able to do more with less people, and it has to be efficient. So we can't get inundated with millions and millions of alerts. In the Target breach, they had 80,000 alerts telling them about that attack. But they weren't able to get to all of them. So they just kind of let them fall by the wayside. And the old paradigm, which worked really well for a long time, is let's build new rules. Let's build different types of signatures, and then we'll analyze all the information as it's coming in. But we can't keep writing more and more correlation rules. It just doesn't scale. So every day it's see what's going out there, create a new correlation rule, import it, and just kind of going through that process. The new paradigm, what I'm seeing at least, is using data science and machine learning to help operationalize what's normal for every user, kind of baseline that entire behavior, and then start to call out different types of anomalies. And being able to do that in near real time is the big trick there. So you need to have a big data foundation, and then you're incorporating security analytics and using machine learning. What this lets you do is find unknown threats, attack patterns that we haven't even seen yet. So if I'm able to say that one user is now doing something that's different, that he hasn't done before, and that user is touching one system and a different system, we might be able, just from the anomalies, just because you're deviating from the behavior, that might be an attack pattern that hasn't been seen before. So really, this is the focus around looking for unknown threats, because we're not really using signatures anymore. If you're taking this approach, we're baselining every entity, users, devices, applications, what's normal for all these different systems, and when is there an anomaly. And that's kind of what will allow you to find different types of unknown threats. And when you're baselining, really you want to map the different behaviors to different models, and there are two ways to approach this. Two different types of machine learning processes. The first one is supervised machine learning, where you're going to grab a particular data set, analyze it, and then you have to train the model. So there's always an acceptable level of false positives and false negatives. So where is that line? Okay, I don't want to get too many false positives, but I also want to miss some things. So where do you draw that line? So you have to test it, and then you apply an algorithm, and then you have finally a product. You verify that this is going to work correctly, and then you're able to put it into production. And this is critical to be able to detect mobile indicators of compromise. So kind of looking at it from just command and control perspective, attackers that are smart enough, malware that's smart enough, is going to be hopping their command and control servers. So it'll be going from one server to another one. If you're only looking at known bad C2, you'll kind of create some blind spots. If you can look at the actual behavior, the moment that an insider starts doing things that they don't normally do, or that they become compromised, because those two things are relatively similar. A compromised user and a user that's trying to do something bad. They're behaving in similar ways. They're doing things that they haven't seen before. So in using behavior is really, really critical. And then finally, without actually going in and having to look at the data and massage the data, there's unsupervised machine learning. So unsupervised machine learning is going to label and categorize the data automatically without the need for human feedback. Because remember that the original idea is that we don't have enough time to keep writing more and more correlation rules. That doesn't scale. There aren't enough talented security folks to go around. So creating some machine learning system that you have to train kind of ties back to that issue. So if you're using unsupervised machine learning, it's going to automatically learn. It'll know when the model is stabilized, it'll know when the model is ready, and then it'll start to call out different types of anomalies. I talked to a lot of CEOs and CISOs, and they always say, know thyself, kind of know everything that you have in your environment. But I kind of take that one step further, and I say, hack thyself. So really scan everything with credentials or with agents, get that deeper level of understanding of what the security weaknesses are on those systems, and really pen test it. So pen testing is a term that gets thrown around a lot, but pen testing is trying to exploit a vulnerability. I've had some folks that say they wanted a pen test, and then it turns out they just want a vulnerability scan. So kind of making a clear differentiation there. Phish your employees. I used to, well, so a long time ago, I worked at a bank in Southern California, and I had one of my employees who was a member service representative. She was probably the least technically savvy person that I've ever met, and we ran a phishing campaign. And we phished her, we called her, she opened up the command prompt and started running commands. But it really is once bitten, twice shy, because from that point forward, anything that popped up on her computer, she was calling security and saying, hey, is this okay? So when you phish the employees, it's not to trick them. You know, that's not kind of the mentality. It's let's make sure that this is what attackers would do, and let's make sure that we'll be able to catch those things. And provide training, you know, kind of just some common sense goes a really, really long way. And provide USB drops. So I get really nervous when people are just passing around USB sticks. I've played a little bit around with Rubber Ducky, and I see what it can do. You can take over systems pretty easily by passing USB sticks around. And probably one of the most famous attacks, Stuxnet, it was air-gapped Iranian nuclear centrifuge. How'd they get in there? USB. So USB is kind of an impressive technology also. It goes back to Pentium 2 MMX, if anybody can remember that. So USB's been around for at least 20 years. I don't know, like another technology that's been around for that long. But pass around USB sticks, drop them in the hallways, put them in the bathroom, even though that's kind of gross, and see if somebody's going to grab it and put it into their computer. And let them know, like, hey, you shouldn't have done that. Don't be putting USB sticks, or put crazy glue on them or something. And then social engineering. So drive up to the shop with AT&T or Verizon shirt in the truck and say, hey, the CISO or CIO told me that I need to install this. It's really important. Are they going to let him and are they going to give him access to the data room or not? So hack thyself. Make sure that when you're doing this, it has to be strategic and comprehensive. So when I was at Rapid7, we sold pen testing services, and I don't know how many times people wanted a pen test, but really but don't exploit anything. Like, well, that's not a real pen test. In one instance, there was an organization who we did a pen test against their web application. And everything looked good. 3 months later, that web application gets hacked, gets breached. And they said, well, yeah, you guys gave us a clean bill of health. What's going on here? And we go back and we look, and we didn't actually pen test the application that was in production. We pen tested the test application. We pen tested pre-production. So why are you going to pen test pre-production if you can't? It's not an exact copy. I highly recommend pen testing in production. Do it during down hours, maintenance windows. If not, you give yourself a huge blind spot. Sharing is caring. So I mentioned this earlier. So what can we do to disrupt the techniques that the bad guys are going to use against us? We need a way to export their techniques and then share that so that somebody can import those techniques. Things like ISACs help, Soltra Edge and other industries, and I kind of see different organizations starting to band together, whether it's large healthcare providers that have a color and are all talking together, and I think that's great. Or organizations, and they go by their football affiliations or sports affiliations, the Big 12 and all those different organizations. They get together and they say, we should share our information. It's starting to get there, but there isn't an easy way to do that yet. But we're starting to get there. People are starting to think this way, because when we actually get this stuff together and we start doing it correctly, it's going to make it so much more difficult. We'll pretty much be able to exterminate a certain variant of malware because they all kind of follow the same patterns. And if we're able to say, whenever we see this pattern, automatically detect it or automatically stop it, even better, then they'll have to change and rewrite that entire malware or those exploits. This is something that we talk a lot about at Splunk is listen to your data. Have a realistic vision of where you are. Talked to CISO a couple weeks ago, and he said, you know, we're pretty good. We feel like we're pretty good. I said, okay, cool. Do you have centralized logging? Like, oh, yeah, the logs are on the servers. Like, no, like centralized logging. That means that all of your logs, your server logs, should be going somewhere for analysis and for correlation instead of grepping system by system. Like that just doesn't make any sense. And if the bigger you are, that should really be something to focus on. So having unrealistic visions on, yeah, we're doing okay when you're not doing the basics is really, really tough. And have a path too, have a vision, have a strategy, have a roadmap for the organization, for the security organization. We talk a lot at Splunk that all data is security relevant. The moment that you say, oh, well, that data is not that important, I'm not going to take a look at that data, that's when the attackers will figure out a way to leverage that data that you're not listening to and use that against you. If you don't have the data, you can't perform an investigation. So I'd talk to some law enforcement agencies, and whenever they go into a place that's been breached, the very first thing is, you know, do you have Splunk? If they have Splunk, they hand them these searches. Okay, great. They run these searches to see if you have these patterns. So the bits and pieces of exporting certain things, certain searches, is starting to get there. This is taken from the SANS Threat Hunting Summit. On, you know, everybody's talking about threat hunting right now, but you can't threat hunt everything. So where do you start your threat hunting? Kind of on the left side is ad hoc searching. Oh, this computer is really slow right now. Let's see what's going on there. Let's comb through the logs and the data. Or you've centralized it and you're starting to do some statistical analysis. Maybe you find a mean, you find 2 standard deviations out. Where are the outliers? You can use visualization techniques. So put it on some fancy graph or chart or 3D, whatever you can get your hands on, and see, you know, when are there any spikes. Aggregation is just correlation. So grabbing multiple data sources. And, you know, when something with fire and something on my firewall and a server log of a certain type, and I have a vulnerability on that system that has an exploit out there for it, boom, you know, those things all line up, then this is something that's really, really important. And then kind of the most mature phase is grabbing all that data, modeling it, looking for anomalies using machine learning and data science. So kind of where are different folks on the path? So the very first part is search and investigate. From there, they'll move on to proactive monitoring and alerting. Then you have security situational awareness. And then finally, real-time risk insight, where you're able to almost predict the different things that are going to happen because you've not just gotten the different IOCs from different areas, but you've built in your own IOCs also. And you're starting to create your own threat intelligence, and that's when you're really becoming more and more proactive. So a couple of takeaways before we wrap up here. Number one, they're coming for us. You know, the data is there. The data is worth money. They're in the business. They're definitely trying to get rich off of this. Machine learning is something that's critical. When you're able to go beyond correlation and use machine learning as a place to start your threat hunting, you can really go much deeper. Hack Thyself. Make sure that your pen test and what you're doing around trying to take advantage of security weaknesses, and also talking to the different people that are in the organization. Make sure that they're strategic and comprehensive, and share and use. So cybersecurity is not a competitive advantage. Right? If you're kind of hiding all of the secrets. You don't have to say exactly what you did, but just those different techniques. The more that we can share, that's where it's going to make it much more expensive and much more difficult for attackers. And be realistic of where you are and how you could possibly improve. This is just a standard Splunk site, but these are the different services and products that we offer. And if you'd like to talk to me after, just I'll be up here. Thank you.